So gaslighting. So for one, I know what that is. So step one is to explain what a man is in a real way. The way to counter to gaslighting effect is that in a real way, most gaslighting can be concise down to essentially this master-slave shit. And that there's whole groups that claim to know what a man is, and I'll tell you what a man is. The guy that shoves his baby in you. That's what a master is, or a man. And that as long as they refrain from essentially, like some women have to deal with the online blackmailing, as long as they refrain from blackmailing as like a, essentially, they can't be your master if you homo into the dark web, and that, but they can still be your master or something if they cheat. They become lesser in some of the aspects. They still have to deal with some other kind of side aspects, but the reality is that a man is the one that puts the baby in you and then stays 100% monogamous. That is what a man is. It's pretty much what every woman, especially the ones that like have some swinger orgy in the past that somebody uploads and then shows on your screen when they don't want you talking about something. Those women, that's pretty common. It kind of is. Especially in colleges nowadays, people put up cameras in their dorm rooms and shit, and people are doing group sex stuff. And then somebody's always recording that stuff and uploading it to these dark webs and shit. Okay, so essentially what you need to do is you really need to, most of those women will suffer from a gaslight of thinking that they need some stupid fucking pedophile and be sucking their dick. Alright? The whole idea is that the stupid fucking pedophile whose dick you suck is the one who has that extortion blackmail. 100% of the time. That is what being a satanic male pedophile is. And so, essentially, when you suck their dick, then they stop extorting you. And that's literally what it is. So, essentially step one in the counter to the gaslighting effect is to make the woman hate male pedophiles. That can go a long way because they're the ones that build the gaslights. And that once you get them to stop intellectually feeding from their dick brain, that has a lot of effect on countering. Basically, the moment that they realize that they're just being fucking manipulated by weird fucking pedophiles and shit, then everything that they ever were gaslit or told from that person starts to be called into question. So what happens then? I'll tell you what happens then. Then they start to feel disillusioned. They've been basing life actions and life based on gaslights. But to disrupt that causes chaos. And that with that has them seeking a new intellectual master. And so that leaves them open for some other male pedophile that looks different. Or some Satanist female kind of stuff. That then has a different side way of reestablishing gaslights and shit. A lot of times, I know the gays kind of mess up with this stuff, but the whole reality is that they, a lot of times, are under the same gaslights. They have like a different way, which is to like blackmail as a homo. And that then, essentially, that's where in their world, somebody probably collects it, but then they just don't force anybody to do that stuff. And so that's a common way when it comes to this online extortion. But gaslights at their core stem from what's called society, and it's essentially Satanism. And that the whole idea is that basically if you find the right dickhead asshole pig and you ask them what things you can't talk about in society, that is essentially that's what you talk about. And that the real key to that is like, okay, with the speakers, okay? So essentially that's a scientific device. There's a logical, rational reason for everything. Like when I find these people talking about brain controls and then it coalesced with the fucking speakers, I know what that is. And so there's a logical, rational, scientific explanation. And that essentially, once you start to understand what the basics of like the modern dark web and shit is, you'll start to realize that, yeah, somebody outfits people with speakers in satanic S&M, and that then they essentially just do like little hypnosis suggestions in a low volume. So instead, a lot of times people believe that their brains are controlled. Essentially, they're just being suggested at such a low volume that it ends up causing them to just, like a reaction, like a reflex, has them reacting. And that's it. And that's all it is. Just somebody, just, no, OCD, stupid little psychopath pedophiles that sit around training endlessly at what is a modern militarized psychopy method. So that's how you break down the speaker. The speaker gaslight. A lot of times they'll believe that they have some satanic demon or altar inside. All it is just a fucking speaker. Okay, this is what I know. I'm a genius. This is what I know. I read in this sociology book this idea of internal dialogue. There is no internal dialogue. Clear. Empty sound. That is thought. And so when people sit there, when they just sit there, not moving their mouth, not talking, then all of a sudden they'll be like, I feel so fat. That is the speaker. And so the whole idea is that once a lot of people may not know that. And so you have to somewhat gauge like whoever the victim is. More than likely, nowadays, people just like to do that shit on the dark web to anyone. Anyone that they can see, like these high school girls, they'll be drunk at a party, they'll be passed out, they'll be raping them, and then somebody will be in like the high school drug world, and they will have speakers, they'll put speakers in their ear. It is. And so that's the kind of stuff that that nobody talks about. And see, that right there, that's a gaslight. See, I talk about it. I'm not afraid of that. There's a scientific, logical, rational explanation. I went and researched and figured out why all these people were saying weird things like that. Brain controls and people that hear internal dialogue. That just never made sense to me. Never had an internal dialogue. Okay? Didn't make sense? Your brain doesn't speak to you. Okay? It just doesn't. And I've seen in sociology how they have that. And that sometimes I wonder what that refers to, because that is when I took the sociology survey class. I wondered, internal dialogue, huh? I don't have that. And I always wondered what the fuck that is. And then when I started researching with these pair of speakers and shit, and people started doing that, and then I started to realize there's probably more people. Then people would realize that essentially for like $50, you can get probably a pair of speakers at least one speaker. They probably last maybe a month. And if they have it like really low volume, then the battery doesn't run out as fast. And so that's when they start doing the internal dialogue shit. And so the speaker stuff is still sits on the black market because essentially it's all ripped off prototypes. And until they can keep people from fucking with people, then essentially they can't necessarily they're sitting in like an FDA approval because essentially they can't guarantee people like getting sick fucked in their speaker, okay? And so there's real prototypes, and then all the malicious aspects of it, all these corporations that have these prototypes, they're a little leery about like even going down that road because all of them are like rich people that are lazy and they go and get like the cochlear implant ones, the expensive ones, and they have problems with them. And so essentially until they can prevent that shit, essentially the prototypes will sit in standby in most companies. I mean, this is true. Right now, it's like pretty much just the deaf people. And it's like the government, I know, is real adamant about this because of this fucking psychotic psychopy and shit. They have that, they have their soldiers with those, and that they sit there overseas getting that sick fuck shit in their speaker. And so they already know the like negative, malicious aspects to it. And so that's kind of where the approach also, the wizard approach is to go, hey, what did they say? Was it dumb and stupid? Here's logical and rational and a scientific explanation. And so the whole idea is that once you get them in ways, once they start searching for other intellectual masters, kind of, you have to approach it like, well, here's the plain, logical, easy, concise reasonings and ways to follow the understanding of it in every way. Then it has an effect on taking away what they view as like, see, the secret to it is like, oh my God, I'm so ugly. Oh my God, I'm so fat. That's the shit. Speaking about what real thought is, and then they'll all have that. If they have the speakers, that's like what they do. That's what they do to women on dark web. They have those misogynists. And so, basically, and so that right there, that is a really powerful kind of way to approach because it'll wake them up to reality. Is like, oh, I feel so crazy. And that's the kind of shit that they put in like low volume in the speaker, and that's internal dialogue. See, that's sick fuck shit. That has an effect because they'll feel crazy. Somebody will be putting that in their speaker. It'll be reinforcing what they already kind of think because they're gaslit and confused and stuff. And then when you explain to them what sick fucks do, then they start to feel less crazy. And then it starts to break down what the gaslighting does, which is to make people feel crazy. It makes them question their own reality. See, the true training for gaslight resistance is to always approach everything in a logical and rational and scientific way. And that in ways that becomes difficult for people that have maybe less intellectual ability or something. But the whole idea is that there's certain ways that you can completely break down a lot of the gaslightings by attacking whose dick do you put in your mouth and speakers have low volumes, and that nobody really has internal dialogue, and that you can really break down most of the stuff that gets used in a modern way. It could break, mostly it affects women, does, and that it basically cuts right through what is some of the main aspects to all this. The whole idea is that they also use certain things like when you get blackout drunk, they try and claim that you switch personalities and shit. Oh, here's the other one. Blinking. These people on dark web, they're like they'll speak to each other. There's no such thing as internal dialogue in an audio way. Like that. A lot of times they confirm things by blinking at each other on dark web. They do. And so that kind of weird, retarded shit gets used because, basically they'll always be feeding from other people that will be blinking. And then they're under some sort of assumption that it would be impossible to just blink. I mean, you can just blink, okay? You can't. And so people get trained all over the dark web to assume that when everybody blinks that it ends up being the truth or something. And it's like, it's like Jesus is president of the United States. And you see that you can utilize certain examples or something, and that it starts to crack their belief in that stuff. And see, those blinks are what gets used to slowly break them down because people will look at them and then they'll say that they're schizophrenics and shit like that. And then they'll blink and shit. And then they'll start to question their own sanity. And then they start feeding them seemingly logical kind of ideas. And that is essentially where that's the process that they start to break them down with. They start to get them to fear everything. They get them isolated to like these side groups of, oh, well, we'll do this counseling online, but we won't tell any psychologist or something. And it's like, that's the kind of shit that's the psychologists, they just need to deprogram people. That's what they do, basically. And the other thing is that in the low volume speakers, which get utilized for this whole process, they they have like phrases that coincide with fear of isolation, fear of being in jail, fear of being in a psych unit, all that shit. And so, it'll come in an internal dialogue like, oh my God, I'm so crazy. I don't want anybody to know. Basically. So that's the kind of stuff that they do in gaslighting. And it's a whole misogyny, sophisticated fucking thing that they do. Like even those people, a video like this, they'll be cutting it, then they'll be remaking it, and then they'll be shoving it in their stupid little pig site. Then the stupid little pig will be like, we don't have to investigate because he's a fox watching scarecrow. Basically. And so those are cop gang. More than likely those ones are pretty much like shoved in Islamic terror blackmail system so that the rest of the government doesn't see. Oh. See, that's like the stuff in society that you're not allowed to talk about. How the pigs fucked up so bad that they literally had to pay Islamic terrorists that have a dark web money just to hide all their sick fuck blackmails and shit. See, that's the stuff that pigs say you can't talk about. And so I find all that stuff. And then I talk about it. Because they do weird, satanic, fucking, the whole idea is that they have like so many of these women that are basically just huge products of like massive systemized gaslighting, that it becomes like a normative thing for these women to just be gaslit. And that's pretty much, and that these pigs are always the ones shoving their dicks down their throats and shit like that. Okay? And they always like to trick them. You can fix schizoids by, they attempt to get them to believe in fixing schizoids by doing the fuck switching. Okay, that's gaslight. Not supposed to do that. And so that is essentially, that's the approach. But see, I did research. Oh yeah, I did research because essentially people 2013, 14, 15 were essentially bombarding me with forms of massive gaslighting. And that even though it essentially was confusing, like, this doesn't seem right, and kind of stuff, but it's not very effective on me because I'm logical and rational, and I do science, where a lot of it operates around satanic, demons, spiritual kind of stuff. And that stuff doesn't mean nothing to me. I'll believe in essentially what would be like the Jewish Holy Spirit kind of stuff. I'll believe in that as a faith. Basically, as something that separates us from animals. But yeah, these pigs, they're not, they're an animal. Okay? But that's essentially where anything that comes from, and then the whole idea is that the people that do this aren't very smart at all. It's just they know how to be good at lying and manipulating and doing the gaslighting in the Satan S&M ways. Basically. And so the one thing that I like to do is I like to build myself into 100% deprogram. 100% deprogram. And all these dumb pigs, they'll sit around calling somebody like a pedophile at a church or something for saying the word deprogramming. See, I isolate every stupid thought that they fucking have. More than likely, that pig will be online going to like an E-free kind of church and stuff and will be blackmailed as a pedophile. Well, they talk outwardly about themselves. A lot of the time. So that's kind of what it is. So essentially it disrupts a lot of things, You get a pig, they like to gather all these women that believe in all these gaslights. And then somebody like me can pretty much disrupt most of the intellectual gaslighting control over them. And then stupid pig gets all psycho-y. And then everybody sees as a stupid fucking pedophile is just a psycho. Or a sociopath. And then, because they make these women believe in them being like helpful and shit. And then they see them turn into stupid little pedophiles that are psycho. And then the pig becomes my bitch. See, as a wizard, you're supposed to make dumb pedophiles your bitch. And then letting the pig think for himself ends up deprogramming those women even more. That's my stupid little bitch. And then, as you start to build up the anger, the male pedophile, stupid little bitch, surly bitch, then you start acting like a military guy, kind of. And then that starts to build up his fucking psychoness. And then those women, you'll completely break the gaslighting master control. If you do it, you gotta finesse it. Well, these military guys that I researched, they were able to do that a lot. But they are held under some of these expectations of stuff to not talk about, but it basically comes from they'll get the sound torture or something in their dark web. But they are pretty decent and like getting women to see like how fucking psycho-y the guy, the cop or whatever that everybody thinks is nice and shit. They know how to just